everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again. And we're just going to carry on now with this ongoing focus on the coronavirus and the effects that it's having on ongoing sports. So I recently taught another video about the effect that it's having on the football season and the leagues and the certain cup tournaments, and whether we should carry those on or whether those should be null and voided. So we're just going to talk about now the tennis events and the perspective on the season throughout. So if anybody doesn't know, I'm sure you all do by now because everybody's keeping up to date constantly with all the coronavirus updates. But just in case you didn't know, the ATP have decided to basically cancel the tour for the next 6 weeks, and that I believe leads up to April the 20th. So the events that are going to be cancelled include the Miami Open. If you remember, I did a previous video commenting on the Indian Wells in California that had been cancelled because they had one case of a coronavirus outbreak there, and in that video I did anticipate the Miami Open would be cancelled as well because it was in such close proximity. That was due to start, I believe, on the 25th of March. So I kind of knew that was going to get cancelled anyway. So there are also US Clay Court Championships in Houston that have also been cancelled. And as well as that, you've got the Monte Carlo Masters, which was due to take place in April, I believe. That was going to be cancelled, as well as the Barcelona Open, which is ATP 500, and that's going to be cancelled as well. So again, no, I've got no problems with this, and I'm pretty sure all fans alike have no issues with this initiative that they've taken. You know, considering the current phase of the outbreak, as we all know, it's really now affecting all countries. You've got so many countries now taking a quarantine and lockdown initiative. That's something I personally agree that the UK should be doing, but that's another debate for a separate time on here. But I don't think any fan could really have a problem. I know I read a lot of chat forums and they say, well, this is just like the common flu. Why are we cancelling events because of that? I think we can safely say this is a bit more than the common flu. You know, this is a really serious kind of outbreak that we're dealing with here. So no problem at all with the ATP taking its stance. We're seeing this across the board, not only with sports, with television series, with movies, everybody postponing and cancelling their events left, right and centre. So no issues there. The really kind of debate that we're seeing in tennis really now is, what about the future events? So after the Barcelona, you've still got the Open, you've still got the Rome Masters, you've still got the Madrid Masters, and of course you've got the French Open in Roland Garros. So what do we do about those events going forward? And then later on you've got Wimbledon, of course, and I'm not going to kind of say the US, because the US Open is August and September, and again I'm being very optimistic here. Hopefully by that time we'll see a kind of slowing down or leveling off, at the very least a leveling off of the spreading of the disease, and hopefully we'll see countries kind of get a bigger grip and much more controlling of the spread, if you like. So I'm just going to leave off going to the US Open and the kind of Asian swing later, and the ATP tournaments. You know, just quickly, there's a whole debate on should we actually cancel the tennis tour for the year or not. I don't think we should go into that extreme yet. I think right now we should just stay in the present and oversee events and how the virus reacts really over the next 6 to 8 to 10 weeks before we make any future decisions about whether we start cancelling the tour for the rest of the year. And you know, so I think we should just leave that debate for now. I know there have been various other questions about the kind of ranking points, and again, you have two decisions. I think you could either deduct the ranking points, as I mentioned before. The way the ranking points work, you win points for participating in an event, and then the next year you have to protect those points, and if you underperform, you lose any deficits from the points you gained from the previous year. So I'm of the belief that you should freeze points. So, for example, anybody who's accumulated points from last year's, you know, Miami Open, Monte Carlo, Barcelona, you know, you shouldn't take the points away from those people. You should just freeze the points, let them retain it, and then hopefully by next year we're not even talking about this anymore, or we're talking about it in a much more of a much more of a contained and restrained capacity. Okay, so let players retain points, don't sort of take the points away from the players themselves. And, any other disputes about players not being able to participate, yeah, I know the top earning players, it's not an issue as such for them. Like I said, Nadal, Djokovic, Serena, Federer, multi-millionaires, not an issue for them. It's more about the lesser ranked players, because obviously if they don't participate in these events, they can't earn any prize money. Potential for endorsement money, etc., is a lot more reduced. Therefore, how can they sustain themselves going forward for the remainder of the tour? Right now, I've seen a lot of people say, well, shouldn't the ATP kind of collate together and kind of support the lower players? But of course, the problem you have there is that by not having these events, therefore the ATP is losing money, right? They're losing money from ticket sales, from gate revenue, from broadcasting rights, etc., etc. So it you have to look at it as a kind of cyclical kind of process, right? So the ATP, brings money in, generates money from sponsorship, advertising, etc. And then all the money they bring in, then they would kind of flood out, to whatever relevant causes and players, etc., etc. That's a general view of how a sport, my opinion, should work. A unified, organised sport should work. You bring the money in and then you flood it around equally amongst all players and groups that are involved within the sport, right? Boxing doesn't take this approach, but that's another debate entirely. But that's the other issue that people have, right? That, okay, how can you really support the lower ranked players if the ATP isn't getting any money in from these tournaments that are being cancelled? You see, that's the kind of dilemma that we're caught in here. But really, that's the only other issue you have, really. It's just, again, what happens going forward. Now, we can't really make any further predictions until we see how this virus reacts going forward, whether it will hit a peak stage in the next couple of weeks and then we'll start to see a small, steady decline. As I mentioned before, a lot of countries taking initiative already, locking down, quarantining. Again, I fully support that. I think that's the right way to go. You have to take action in trying to control the spread, slow down the spread, because as we know, there's no scope for any vaccination that's going to be produced. And even if there was, it would still take a long time to get any vaccine distributed on a massive production level out to all the countries that require it. So the next action is to kind of lock down and kind of just, if we can, contain and stop the spread going forward. So it's hard to predict what's going to happen to the French Open, to the Wimbledon. And like I said, those are the two, if you like, the Grand Slams that really people are sort of asking questions about, because obviously they're the bigger tournaments. They're the ones really that's going to bring in the most money, if you like, from the ATP tours. Those are the bigger scale effects, right? And as we're seeing in the UK particularly now, the numbers are going up, 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 up. So by the time we go to Wimbledon, if we don't contain the spread, because remember, the UK isn't having a lockdown like the other countries are right now. So by the time we get to June, let's just say June, right? You could be dealing with hundreds of deaths in the UK. I mean, I don't really like speculating. I know I'm not trying to scaremonger here, but I'm just exploring that scenario that by the time we get to early June, we could have had hundreds of deaths and thousands of people getting infected. And that's when you really have to decide, should Wimbledon get cancelled? I mean, I think, to be honest, if this kept going and the French Open got cancelled, I'd pretty much say Wimbledon would get cancelled as well. It's only 2 weeks? I believe it's 2-3 weeks in between the French Open and Wimbledon. We always know, if you follow the sport, there's that short period of time between the French Open and Wimbledon. So if we're at this stage in Roland Garros and we've cancelled Roland Garros, then I would think 9 times out of 10 we're probably going to cancel Wimbledon, and then I think we're going to wait and see what would happen. I think there's like a 5 or 6 week gap between Wimbledon and then the start of the hard court swing before we lead into the US Open. So I think if Wimbledon got cancelled, I think they would wait and see further on before making any decisions for the US Open going forwards there. So that's really the kind of current scenario that we're in. Again, agree with the ATP, cancelling the tour until April the 20th, and then we can assess the effects of the virus going forward, and then make a decision then on the remaining clay court tournaments, and then the French Open and Wimbledon. As I've stated before, I don't think we should be deducting any ranking points. Just freeze the ranking points, freeze the ranking positions as they are. You can't penalise the players at all for what's going on around them here. If we did want to continue the events, now that's the only other question now. I believe, and I've said this when I made a video about the football season, I believe they should be played behind closed doors. If you're going to carry on with the tennis tour, I think you should play it behind closed doors. Now, it's a different scenario with football because kind of tennis, it's kind of like we could, let's say you could end the tour now, you can freeze the tour now. So players have earned all their achievements up to this point, whereas in football, if you like, or rugby, where you've kind of got a league scenario, where you've got remaining games, so there's still a tournament to be resolved, if you like. It's not as if tennis, where we've started a Grand Slam tournament, right? And then we're going to cancel it halfway through. And then you've still got quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals to go, right? So far, everything in tennis, all tournaments have resolved. They've reached the end or they haven't started. So when you have a setup like that, it's a much easier, less complicated decision if you wanted to explore the idea of voiding the sport or voiding the tour for the rest of the year, because there's nothing ongoing. Whereas if you're looking at football or let's say basketball or any other sports that have a league format or an existing tournament format, those kind of events are still going and they're in their latter stages. That's why there's a bit more of a debate going on whether you should void those tournaments or just try and see if you can resume them at a later date. But tennis, everything's stopped now. So if you did want to avoid the whole tennis tour, and I don't think we should. It's too early to explore that. But let's say if you did, you could do it now and just void it and just say, right, all the rankings, all the tournaments, this is how it finished, void it now and then begin next year. Okay? It's more clear cut, it's more kind of easier to do if you did want to do that. But if you wanted to carry on, right, I do believe in playing behind closed doors, because again, you're just by inviting crowded areas to come back. And again, these are tournaments, they're not one-off, and what I mean by that is they're not participating on one day. They're over 2 weeks, right? So you're asking thousands of people coming in from all sorts of places over a 2-week period to congregate, in stadiums, in densely populated areas amongst the stadium, right, over a 2-3 week period. I just don't think that's a really viable option, right now with the way the virus is spreading. So I think if you wanted to continue the tour, play it behind closed doors. Now I know, yes, tournaments are going to lose out a lot. I don't know if there's other maybe sponsorship angles or maybe broadcasting rights they can do. I've seen a lot of people talk about, well, maybe we could kind of have a pay-per-view initiative, right? And that would be a way that the tour can kind of compensate to a degree financially, right, by having a pay-per-view basis on there. Now, I don't know if they have the tools or the format to be able to introduce a pay-per-view structure straight away, because you can't just wake up tomorrow and think, oh yeah, let's just put pay-per-view. You need portals, and you need a structure where people can log on and give their bank details and make back transfers. What happens if you have failed transfers? What happens if you're going to have lots of fans trying to make payments over a period of time? So that's going to cause kind of slowing down issues, buffering issues with transfers of money in and out. So it's not quite a simple process, if you see what I'm saying. Then you have to go through the whole idea of promoting the pay-per-view ideas, doing all your advertising, etc., etc. So it's not as easy as just waking up tomorrow and think, oh well, let's just put everything on pay-per-view. There's a structure and a process that you've got to go through if you want to bring about pay-per-view models for the next couple of months. Okay, so it's not as simple as that. So again, I'm not saying you can't do that for tennis. You could do that. I don't like. I mean, I've mentioned in a lot of my boxing videos, I hate the whole idea of pay-per-view. I don't like it. I would hate to see it creep into tennis or any other sport. You know, I think it's just a selfish way for other people to make money for themselves rather than benefiting the sport as a whole. So I would hate to see a pay-per-view model come into tennis. So I think if you're going to continue the tour, let's have it behind closed doors if you wanted to, and just try and carry on the tour there. But like I said, that's if you did want to stop the tour now and just cancel it for the next couple of months until the US Open or the hard court leading up to the US Open, or you wanted to cancel it for the rest of the year, you've got a lot more clear cut, if you like, procedure to do that, because there's nothing ongoing right now, as opposed to the other sports I mentioned where you've got other tournaments that are kind of in their latter stages of being completed. Tennis, you could just say, right, stop now, cancel everything, bring on next year. Okay, so I know there's a lot of financial consideration to bring into play, but that's countered off the fact that we are in a massive health crisis here. And first and foremost, what should be the most priority is people's health and people's safety. Okay, that should be the first one's priority. So that's why I agree with the ATP postponing these tournaments, and then they're going to assess and see what happens with it going forward. I don't subscribe to cancel the tour for the rest of the year, and I believe if you're going to continue the tour, it should be events played behind closed doors. And of course, as I mentioned in my football videos, all players and coaching staff, and if you're going to have umpires and ball kids, etc., all players, of course, would you would undergo sort of testing and making sure everybody that's participating in these tournaments are healthy. Players would do that anyway, right? We know that any professional sports athlete would constantly monitor themselves and their health and etc. Well, that's going to go double now with this virus outbreak here. So those are my overall thoughts on the virus in terms of the tennis tour, and you know, the potential ramifications and what potential actions could be done. But you let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think I'm talking crazy, and you think if they're going to resume the tour, we should try and have more crowds, maybe smaller crowds, but we still should have crowds on there and still enable the events to bring in a lot more financial revenue, and that would support the tour? Or do you agree with me that if you're going to have these events, that they should definitely be played behind closed doors? Do you think we should hold off the postponement a bit longer? Maybe hold off right the way through until the end of Wimbledon, and then see what happens in the summer hard court swing leading up to the US Open. That wouldn't pick up again till what, middle of August, early middle of August. So that would give you a much longer time then to assess the effects of the virus going forward, and then you can make a further judgment then. So you let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll continue to updates. Like I mentioned in previous videos, I'm not going to make a video every single update, because it's just better to collate the information maybe over a weekly basis and then give my thoughts then, and then I'll continue to give you coverage as I go on there. But that's my thoughts for now. Let me know what you think. Subscribe, of course, take care of yourselves, you know, look after yourselves and family, wash your hands, and you know, try and stay away from densely populated sort of areas and events, and just be sensible at the same time, and take care of yourselves, and I will see you very soon.